Hello, and welcome to an ATLYSS thing. ATLYSS is a game that I feel like a lot of people are probably aware of, but far fewer have actually given a chance. And I get it, I really do, but I gave it a shot, and I'm here to tell you that ATLYSS is doing something really special, and I think it deserves to be celebrated. In the current landscape of failing AAA mega games, ATLYSS is a refreshing breath of air that smells a little like nostalgia, but without the mildew. And before I explain what in the world I mean by that, I want to thank my members, currently on screen. These folks go above and beyond to support the channel every month, and I am very grateful to them. Being a member is never required, but always appreciated. Thank you. Okay, first, we need to address the implausibly endowed gorilla in the room, the character models. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the actual game, because it's doing really cool stuff that I think deserves attention, and besides, beyond an initial eye roll and a chuckle at the sheer absurdity of it, the character designs don't even come to mind anymore, though Vivian is the cutest. But pushing past the paps of preposterous proportions, I think the best way to illustrate how much ATLYSS has to offer is by sharing my own discovery of the game, so you know the mindset I had coming to it. Popular gaming discussion has always been very game of the week, even more so now with the absolute glut of constant bangers that we've been getting this year. There are very few games that persist in common discourse in the way that Skyrim, Deep Rock Galactic, Minecraft, and Stardew Valley persist within the cultural zeitgeist that is the gaming fandom. And over the years, I've kind of developed a sense for what games are being talked about because they're good, and which ones are being talked about because they're a meme. And quite frankly, when the game is a nebulously PS1/N64 furry short stack sim, action game, yeah, I'm gonna assume that one's a meme. But I kept hearing about ATLYSS, and you really don't hear about the meme games for very long. So I asked some friends about it, and one told me that it made him think of Phantasy Star Online and that it's room-to-room dungeon crawling stuff. That's the game you're seeing in the background right now if you haven't switched to another tab. It's an MMO that was originally for the Dreamcast in 2000, and I cannot tell you how much like the future that felt. Quick clarification, it's the game that likely inspired the matchmaking and progression structures of games like Warframe, Destiny, and Monster Hunter. There's a lobby where you can see, I think it was 10 people at a time on the official servers, but gameplay lobbies maxed out at 4. Anyway, I looked up some videos on ATLYSS and I learned that it's actually not a meme game at all. The characters are just like that, the solo developer is super passionate about the game, and they're very much drawing inspiration directly from PSO. And I cherish games where the passion is obvious so very, very much. So I decided to give it a shot, basically expecting a decent action game with loot. I didn't look for a wiki, I didn't look for guides, other than one to get the game to stay on screen with alt-tabbing, but that's a me thing. So I just started playing, expecting nothing more than a competent little action game. Since this is more literally a review than most of my videos, let's get the usual review stuff out of the way. My performance has been excellent. Obviously, look at it. ATLYSS isn't asking much of any even vaguely modern integrated graphics, quite frankly. I'm no longer running a 1080 Ti, but that's the hardware that this footage was captured from, and I was able to very consistently hold somewhere above 100 FPS. And in the era of Unreal Engine 5, that's unfortunately noteworthy. And this is personal preference, but I actually really like the look of it too, and its sense of authenticity. Let me explain. I use the nearest neighbor texture filtering because I'm more nostalgic for the PS1 than the N64, and I notice there is no alpha blending in the textures outside of, specifically, the particle system. And if you're a bit of a retro graphics nerd like I am, you'll know that kind of attention to detail and imitating technical limitations is impressive, and makes it feel real in a way. I don't know if this quite makes sense, but I described ATLYSS's art style to a friend as feeling like it's emulating a console that would have come out about a year before the Dreamcast, if it existed. Mechanically, ATLYSS does a few interesting things, and if you're familiar with Phantasy Star Online and/or Universe, you'll probably recognize how deep that inspiration goes. A small complaint I have is that levels 1 to about 7 or 8 go pretty quick, and then the game feels like it slows to a crawl until you unlock the 3 main classes. Pro tip, your XP gain during this window is largely from repeatable quests rather than pushing into new zones. The game isn't very good at communicating that shift. Once you get to level 10 though, you're able to choose one of the 3 main classes. Fighters are encouraged to play a tank role, bandits are focused on single target damage, and mystics are a mix of AoE, CC, and support utility. But even with that division of labor, all 3 classes are fundamentally combat classes. The footage in the background right now is a bandit with a single target crit chance bow build, so I'm pretty squishy. And even so, I'm intentionally getting right up in there to parry attacks. Everyone, regardless of class, has access to an instant omnidirectional block, and thus to parrying. And you are expected to be regularly parrying attacks during combat, even if you're using what you might assume is a ranged weapon. It's an incredibly potent stun for relatively little risk, once you get the timing right. While you can hold your block for as long as your stamina will let you, there's a window of about half a second or so that will instead proc a parry. Blocking an attack costs some additional stamina while negating all damage, but parrying an attack also refunds the stamina cost of blocking. If the blocked attack is a physical attack, it will also stun the attacking enemy for a second and a half or however long the stun lasts. It's a very generous stun. Also, it just feels really good to parry attacks. Note that if you don't block at all or run out of stamina to block, you will take the hit. It's not straight up easy mode. But since you have to hold the block to parry, the failure mode of parrying too early is just the stamina cost and not getting the stun effect. And that kind of gentle fail ethos exists throughout the entire game. You could call it being casual, and you're free to argue that in the comments, but I found the skill floor required to be at a point where I was consistently mechanically engaged. That kind of leniency to the mechanics means that if you just want to lean back and have a chill time of it, you can. And it can still be a mechanically engaging experience like that without being obligatorily sweaty. But if you want to, you're free to lean in and go fully tryhard, and ATLYSS is more than happy to accommodate and reward that as well. If you're keen on experiencing furry erotic roleplay, I mean very normal multiplayer, ATLYSS has something interesting going on there as well. Mechanically, ATLYSS is interested in giving players a retro MMO experience, but multiplayer servers are expensive and complicated to operate. Wouldn't it be so much easier and cheaper if you could offload the hosting onto the users? Well, yeah, and that used to be the norm in PC gaming, but now it isn't because it's really hard to sell microtransactions on distributed server networks, so we can't have that anymore. But running a game server was usually a whole technical process, and if you didn't have the hardware or knowledge to do it, you had to find a server to play with your friends on, which wasn't always ideal. ATLYSS does this trick where even if you're playing single player, the game still launches a server that just isn't accessible outside your machine. This means that when you select multiplayer, you're free to start your own lobby, and some players even keep lobbies open 24/7. But lobbies can hold more players than can fit in a party, so those 24-hour servers will sometimes have multiple parties going around doing stuff and talking in all chat. If you can find a server like that with low ping, it really manages to capture a lot of the feel of mid-aught small-scale MMOs where the regulars recognized each other. Of course, you can also get that on Affinia, but it's special to experience a new game and get that feeling of community from it. But if you're at all familiar with that feeling from PSO, you're also probably familiar with the hunt. Like my own 17-year hunt for a Heaven Punisher. Yes, I know it's bad and is outclassed by several other guns that I've already owned for many years, but I just like the Heaven Punisher. It's so neat. ATLYSS does not have section IDs, Ubers, or drop rates nearly as low as PSO's, but it does copy the idea of having unique drops assigned to every enemy, with bosses consistently having best-in-slot drops for their level. As an example, the footage in the background was while I was building this character up, so I was running 2 repeatable quests for XP so I can push into the next dungeon. While I was doing so, I looked up the drops for the boss of this dungeon, and it actually drops the best bow in the game, so that's my new target. And once I get that bow, I'll need the right enchant on it, which requires money and a different material for each weapon. In the case of the Coldgeist bow, that material is a soul pearl. Just one, but soul pearls only drop in the next dungeon, and usually only 1 per run. It's also worth pointing out that if I wasn't mostly running solo, the primary use for soul pearls is actually to revive other players. In PSO terms, it's a moon atomizer that you can't just restock on. So it's a pretty expensive enchant and a farm that kept me going for a while, even after I got the bow to drop in the first place. Again, those that are familiar with PSO, PSU, Monster Hunter, or Warframe will probably recognize that kind of progression system, and you'll also be aware that sometimes those systems can be a lot. Here's a good example. In PSO, there's this thing called a mag. I'll skip over a bunch of the nitty-gritty and how mags work because it's a convoluted mess that isn't really relevant, but they're basically really picky and complicated Tamagotchis that increase your stats based on what and how you feed them. And they're very easy to mess up with no means of correcting your mistake. If you care to know more, pause in 3, 2, 1. At full build, your mag is something like 40% of your character's stat total if I remember right. It's significant and extremely necessary. And it takes many hours to raise one to the level cap by waiting 3.5 minutes between each of thousands of feeding sessions. There's also no explanation of this system anywhere to be found in-game, naturally. Leveling mags is miserable and I am not accepting feedback to the contrary. While an interesting idea, it is hands down the worst system in PSO. ATLYSS has no such system. And I don't just mean that there isn't a direct parallel to mags. I mean that there are no systems in ATLYSS with mystery mechanics that aren't explained anywhere. There are no mistakes in your build you can't correct. And while PSO is renowned for its low drop rates, like 1 in 20,000 from a rare enemy, with a 1 in 200 chance to appear, with only 5 spawn chances and some obscure quest no one runs and a piddly 50% DAR, instead, NPCs will tell you the basics of everything you need to know. Respecking your character might as well be free, and the worst drop rate is easy. On screen right now is the drop chart for the boss of the first dungeon. If you're looking for only one of these drops, that's a 1 in 14 chance to get your drop, with a 100% DAR. Compared to PSO, that's incredibly forgiving. It's also highly respectful of the player's time. As of recording this, I have 69 hours in ATLYSS, which was enough to get 2 of the 3 classes to full build, and the third is really close, single-digit hours for sure. Until more is added, there's realistically no more than 100 hours of content in ATLYSS, which is still pretty good for the asking price and the quality of what's here. But there is more stuff coming to ATLYSS. That's just where it stands right now. There are new dungeons, new weapons, new bosses, subclasses, a total revamp of how weapons and abilities function, and a level increase all the way to 40 on the way. But for now, it's like a light version of the old console MMOs that I used to play. It's that same loop of running dungeons to get specific loot and work on a full build of best-in-slot items, but on a timescale that's, frankly, much more reasonable. I can heartily recommend ATLYSS as it stands in its current state, especially if you have a couple friends that would be willing to make characters together. because it's a really well executed, slimmed down snapshot of a certain breed of small scale dungeon crawling MMO from the early to mid-aughts or thereabouts. It's a living example of a dead style of game, lovingly created by a single passionate dev. And yeah, their type is on full display. Which, when you look at the game in its entirety and ask what its guiding philosophy is, fundamentally, ATLYSS is the exact game that KissF wants to see in the world. And for the game's future, I'd personally like to see a pretty significant expansion of the endgame. I think the combat feels really satisfying and the gear progression feels very natural. But I want an excuse to play more of it. Whatever form the future of ATLYSS looks like, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch how it grows. And with that, I have to thank my channel members again. This was a longer gap between videos than usual, migrants suck yo, and your continued support did not go unnoticed, so thank you. Member or otherwise though, you'll find a link to a Discord in the description, and I post about what I'm up to in there sometimes, or just whatever I find interesting, like, here's a shrimp on a treadmill? Yeah, why not? He says to like, comment, and subscribe, by the way. But at the end of the day, thank you very much for stopping by and lending me your ear, and as always, have a great one.